Hello Roud and welcome to worship. As I start our worship today, we say, Jesus is the light of the world, shine on us today. I fancied a bit of a change today, so I thought I'd come outside. I don't know what to expect because the clouds look a bit grey, it's very windy, but sometimes a change does us good. We're continuing to think about different journeys we make in life and how these can affect what we do and how we feel. Today's worship is called Slow Cycling, and it is about life being on a journey that brings lots of changes. When we talk about change, I wonder how many different ideas that brings up. It could be changes of routines at home. It might be changes to your family, such a new baby being born, or a change to your school. Change makes us feel lots of different things as well. We might feel nervous or worried, but there again, it might make us excited and happy. Change is unavoidable most of the time. Imagine how much changing you've done since you were a baby. What about all the changes in school? Whilst I am always amazed by the learning that my reception children do, which continues as they progress through school, last week I was dazzled by poems that were shown to me written by our Year 6 children about how we were feeling in this current situation. Imagine had changes in your learning not happened because you didn't want to do it. This change happens to all of us as we go through life. A friend of mine was in a bike race a few months ago, but it was one with a difference. He had to ride as slowly as possible. Instead of being the fastest from the start of the race and the first to cross the line, this race relied on people going as slowly as possible until they crossed the start line, and then, only then, could they speed up. This is hard because bicycles only stay upright when they're moving. Go too slowly and you fall over. In the slow race, you're not allowed to put your feet down, and you have to go along a marked out lane and stay within the lines. Life is very much like a journey regardless of speed. We can't stop still or change things from happening. We have to keep going whether we like it or not. The good news is that we have family and friends who come on the journey with us. We also have people at school who journey with us, teachers to take us through the year, teaching assistants who help all of us, lunchtime staff and other adults who work at school. The school wouldn't be able to work without all the people in it that help us. We're all there on this journey to help you as well. Some adults are still friends with the people that they went to school with, sometimes many, many years ago. But the trick is, like the slow bike, to make the most of every single moment, because you'll never get that moment again. The story I'm going to read to you today is called Mrs. Armitage on Wheels. I love this story, and I'm just looking at the blurb at the moment, and it says, when the inventive Mrs. Armitage sets out for a cycle ride, she soon turns her bike into an eye-catching contraption. All she needs now is a little extra oomph. As you can see, it's getting a little bit windy now, but we're going to continue to have our change of worship outside. Mrs. Armitage was out on her bicycle. Breakspear the dog ran alongside. A hedgehog walked across the road. Tring, tring, went Mrs. Armitage on the bell. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is a really loud horn. Mrs. Armitage bought 3 horns. They were all very loud. Beep, beep, honk, honk, whee, went Mrs. Armitage on her horns. Then the chain came off. By the time Mrs. Armitage had got it on again, her hands were all black and greasy. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is somewhere to wash your hands. So she got out a bucket of water and a towel and a soap rack with a bar of soap on, and she hung them all on her bike, and off she went with beautifully clean hands. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself as she cycled along, if it's to be looked after properly, is a complete toolkit. So she got out a toolbox with spanners and screwdrivers and hammers and a cans of oil, and she fixed it onto the back of her bicycle, and off she went. By now, Mrs. Armitage was beginning to think about food. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is somewhere to carry a light snack. So she got a tray of apples and bananas and cheese and tomato sandwiches and a holder for a bottle of lemonade and a flask of cocoa and a special basket of bones and dog biscuits for Breakspear, and she fixed them all to her bike and off they went. But by now Breakspear was feeling quite tired, running alongside the bicycle. You could tell because his tongue was hanging out and he was panting. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is something for a faithful dog to ride on. So she got out some iron brackets and some nuts and bolts and some cushions, and she made a seat for Breakspear, and off they went. They had stopped beside the road for some sandwiches and dog biscuits when it began to rain. Great heavens, Mrs. Armitage said. What this bike needs, Breakspear, is something to keep the rain off us. So she got 2 umbrellas, one large, one small, and she fixed them onto the bicycle, and off they went. Riding through the rain, Mrs. Armitage began to feel rather downhearted. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is a bit of cheerful music. So she got a transistor radio, which is a cassette player. We have CD players now, and a lot of cassettes of cheerful music and a mouth organ so that she could join in. And she fixed them all to the bike, and off they went. Mrs. Armitage was running the pedals, turning the pedals so fast and blowing the mouth organ so hard that soon she was nearly exhausted. What this bike needs, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, is a bit of extra oomph. And so she got some wood and some ropes and some tarpaulin, and she rigged up a mast and a sail and added a few yards of bunting and an anchor into the bargain. And off they went with the wind behind them, faster and faster, until crash, Crunch, clang, clatter, thud. Hooray! What this bite needs, Breakspear, said Mrs. Armitage as she picked herself up from the wreckage, is taking to the recycling place. And what I need are some roller skates. Whee! But what these roller skates really need, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, what these roller skates really need is... I wonder if she's going to change anything. Well, the wind has just lasted and allowed me to read the story, and hopefully it'll calm down a little bit for the rest of our worship. Mrs. Armitage kept adapting her bike, making changes she felt would be good to help in her daily life. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out for her. However, through making the changes, she realised she might not have got it right, so she decided to try something new. Very often, it is this lesson that makes us even stronger. I don't think the great scientists of the world ever raced into completing something the first time. Their journey would have meant many changes before completing their idea. Christians and people who believe in God believe that God is with us on our journey and through all the changes we make. I'd like you to close your eyes and think about the people who are really important in your lives. Let's be thankful for all the time that you've spent with these people. Think about this year's journey you've been on. When we started the year, we may have thought it was going to follow the same direction as other years, but then a bump in the road comes and our journey changes direction. Think of all you hope for in the future as your journey continues and the things that you find more difficult. Let us remember how you are cared for and supported and not making this journey alone. Let us pray. Thank you for all the people who make our lives so good. As we continue to travel through this year, may we find new friends and value old friends, as well as trying things for the first time, even if we are not sure. Amen. This week in Roud, I'd like you to think of journeys in the Bible and what they are trying to tell us. From the Old Testament, I particularly enjoyed the story of Jonah, who didn't really want to do as God had asked him, and his life went in a slightly different direction to one that he had expected. I hope you all have a good week, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.